Last summer, a research team dragged a net through the Duluth-Superior Harbor at the western tip of Lake Superior. They pulled it up and counted what was inside: 81 tiny shrimp, adults, juveniles, and females carrying babies inside their bodies. Nobody celebrated. Nobody called the press. The lead researcher looked at those 81 shrimp and knew exactly what they meant. Lake Superior, the coldest of the Great Lakes, the deepest, the one with water so clean you can see 70 feet straight down, had just become the last to fall. For 20 years, while every other Great Lake got torn apart by things that didn't belong there, Superior was the one that kept holding. Zebra mussels clogged the pipes in Erie and couldn't get a foothold in Superior. Sea lamprey latched onto the trout in Huron and sucked them dry, but Superior's cold water slowed them down. Round gobies ate the native fish out of Michigan and spread to 4 lakes in a decade, but Superior pushed back. 190 foreign species have gotten into the Great Lakes since we started counting, and for 20 years, Superior kept saying no. A shrimp the size of a grain of rice just ended that streak. And the scary part isn't that it got in. The scary part is how it got in, because the same door that let it through is still wide open, and it's been open for 40 years. Stay with me here. This one builds. The shrimp has a name that sounds like it belongs in a horror movie. Scientists call it the bloody red shrimp. Not because it's dangerous to touch, it's smaller than your pinky nail. But at night, in the water, under a flashlight, a swarm of them glows this deep, translucent red. One researcher described what it looks like when you shine a light on a colony of them hiding in the rocks. He said it looks like the water is bleeding. They come from the other side of the planet. The Black Sea, the Caspian Sea, the brackish edges of Eastern Europe where rivers meet salt water. For thousands of years, that's where they stayed. Then we built them a taxi. Every large ship on the ocean carries ballast water, water pumped into tanks to keep the ship balanced when it's empty. One ship, 20 million gallons. Whatever was living in that water, shrimp, larvae, parasites, things we haven't even named yet, rides along in the dark belly of the freighter for weeks. And when that ship reaches the Great Lakes and flushes its tanks, everything inside comes out. You wouldn't open your front door and let a stranger dump 20 million gallons of foreign water into your living room. But that's basically what we've been doing to the Great Lakes since the 1800s, and we never stopped. Through that door, species after species walked in. The bloody red shrimp was one of the latest. It showed up in Lake Michigan in 2006. 2 years later, 4 of the 5 Great Lakes had breeding populations: Ontario, Michigan, Huron, Erie, one by one, like dominoes tipping over. You already know which lake held out. Here's what makes the bloody red shrimp different from every other invader that's gotten into the Great Lakes. You can't find it. Not can't, as in difficult. Can't, as in the thing is basically invisible during business hours. Zebra mussels, you can see those. They coat the bottom of every dock, every pipe, every boat hull. You step on them barefoot and you know they're there. Round gobies sit on the bottom in plain sight, eating everything smaller than themselves. Those invaders don't hide. The bloody red shrimp does. When the sun comes up, they disappear. They wedge themselves into cracks between rocks, into the gaps inside break walls, into any dark space smaller than your fingertip. They stack on top of each other in there, 300 packed into a single cubic meter of rock. You could be standing on a dock in Duluth right now with 1,000 of them jammed into the stones beneath your feet, and you would have no idea. The only way to know they're there is to come back after dark, grab a flashlight, walk to the water's edge, shine it on a calm surface, and if they're in the rocks below you, you'll see them scatter. A burst of red shooting in every direction like someone dropped a lit match into a puddle of gasoline. 5 seconds later, they're gone. Back into the cracks. Back into the dark. That's why Lake Superior fooled everybody for 8 years. In 2017, a Fish and Wildlife team pulled a single specimen out of Duluth Harbor. 1 shrimp, 1 sample. Could have been a stray. Could have ridden in on somebody's boat trailer. Nobody panicked. Nobody raised the alarm. 1 shrimp isn't an invasion. It's a maybe. 8 years of maybes. 8 years of not looking hard enough, in the right places, at the right time of day. While the shrimp were doing what invasive species do best, breeding in the dark where nobody's watching. Then, last summer, the nets came back with 81. including mothers carrying the next generation inside their bodies. One shrimp is a maybe. 81 pregnant ones is a fact. So now you know what it is. You know how it got in. You know why we didn't catch it. The question that actually matters is, to understand what's coming for the Great Lakes, you don't have to guess. You just have to look at what already happened on the other side of the Atlantic, because Europe is about 15 years ahead of us in finding out what the bloody red shrimp does to fresh water. In the late 1990s, the shrimp spread out of Eastern Europe through canals and rivers, hitching rides the same way it did here. By 2005, it was in reservoirs across Western Europe, the Netherlands, Germany, the United Kingdom. And here's where the story that sounds small starts sounding big. Researchers started noticing something wrong with the base of the food chain. Zooplankton, the tiny organisms floating in the water that everything else depends on, were disappearing. Not slowly, not in the normal seasonal way. Crashing. Whole populations dropping off in areas where the bloody red shrimp had moved in. Now, if you're thinking, okay, some microscopic stuff disappeared, why should I care? This is the part where it connects to your life. Zooplankton is the groceries. It's what baby fish eat when they're too small to eat anything else. Remove it, and the baby fish starve. When the baby fish starve, the bigger fish that eat them have nothing to grow on. When the bigger fish collapse, the fishing industry that depends on them collapses. And when the fishing industry collapses, the communities built around it go with it. In the Great Lakes, that fishing industry is worth $5 billion a year, built on a food chain that starts with organisms you can't even see. The bloody red shrimp eats those organisms. That's all it does. It doesn't bite. It doesn't sting. It doesn't attack boats or clog pipes the way zebra mussels do. It just quietly eats the invisible bottom layer that holds everything else up. And when that layer thins out, everything above it starts to lean. Think of it like pulling threads out of the bottom of a sweater. Nothing happens for a while. You can't even tell anything's missing. Then, one morning, the whole thing unravels and you realize it started months ago. That's what the bloody red shrimp did in Europe. And the man who just confirmed its breeding in Lake Superior gave an answer about what comes next. That's more unsettling than any worst-case prediction. His name is Don Brandstrader, lead author on the Lake Superior study, University of Minnesota Duluth. He spent years studying what lives in these lakes. He knows this shrimp. He knows what it did in Europe. So when reporters asked the obvious question, what's going to happen to Superior, he gave the kind of answer that should scare you more than a dramatic one. He said it's hard to predict with any detail. We don't have firm evidence of bad consequences in the Great Lakes yet, but based on its history of invasion across Europe, significant impacts are possible. That's a scientist telling you 3 things in one sentence. I can't prove it's going to be a disaster. Everything I know says it probably will be. And by the time I can prove it, it'll be too late to stop. That's not calm. That's careful. Say catastrophe before the data's in, and the people who need to act use your uncertainty as their excuse to wait. And while everyone waits, the shrimp keeps breeding. There's a pattern to how invasive species work in the Great Lakes. Something gets in. Scientists raise a flag. Nobody with the power to act treats it as urgent. By the time the damage is obvious enough to justify the budget, the species is everywhere, and the word eradication quietly disappears from every official document. It gets replaced with management, which is a polite way of saying, we lost. Now we're just trying to slow it down. Zebra mussels followed that pattern. Sea lamprey followed that pattern. Round gobies followed that pattern. The bloody red shrimp is following it right now. Michigan has the longest Great Lakes shoreline of any state in the country, more coastline than any state except Alaska. The Great Lakes aren't just part of Michigan, they basically are Michigan. The state is shaped by them, named for them, built around them. Michigan is not actively monitoring for the bloody red shrimp. A state communications specialist confirmed it. Michigan relies on a federal program run by Fish and Wildlife. The state itself, the one with the most to lose, isn't looking. And you can't even be mad at Michigan specifically because this is how it works everywhere. The Great Lakes touch 8 states and 2 countries. Over 30 million people drink from them. And the monitoring system protecting all of it is a patchwork of underfunded federal programs, state agencies pointing at each other, And researchers like Brandstrait are doing the actual work on university budgets that wouldn't cover a single mile of highway, the biggest freshwater system on Earth, and we're guarding it the way you'd guard a bike with a luggage lock, while a shrimp from the Black Sea breeds in the dark. 200 years ago, the Great Lakes were one of the most untouched freshwater systems on the planet. Then we connected them to the Atlantic through canals. Then we let cargo ships flush their ballast tanks directly into the water. Then we watched. 190 species walked through that door. Zebra mussels alone cost the region $500 million a year. Sea lamprey nearly killed the lake trout. And through all of it, we kept pointing at Lake Superior and saying, "At least that one's still clean." It's not clean anymore. And here's the thing about the Great Lakes that nobody wants to say out loud, because once you hear it, it changes how you think about every one of these stories. We have never successfully removed an invasive species from the Great Lakes. Not one. Not in 200 years. Every single thing that got in, stayed in. We didn't beat the zebra mussels. We didn't beat the lamprey, we just spent millions every year keeping the numbers down. We didn't beat the gobies, we managed them. We contained them. We learned to live with the damage. The bloody red shrimp is in Lake Superior now. It's breeding. It's spreading. And based on everything we know about what it did in Europe, it's not done. We're not going to remove it. That option disappeared somewhere between 2017, when one shrimp was a maybe, and last summer when 81 pregnant ones made it a fact. The question isn't whether the Great Lakes are going to change. They already have. 190 times. The question is whether the 191st is the one that finally makes us fix the door.